we all ate perfectly, I think that would be almost like detrimental to our health more than like beneficial because
When you have a meal, you probably should eat your protein first before you have your carbs. Is that true?
so people without diabetes can experience lows as well.
Said, what would be like the perfect low snack if you're trying to like keep yourself elevated?
Wild, yeah. And again, food's so cool, right?
Hey, Palmer fam, I'm Rebecca, and welcome back to another episode of The Urgent Lows, where we talk about lifestyle and type 1 diabetes.
Here, we believe in embracing self-care through life's challenges. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Trevor, and he is a diabetes dietitian. We are so happy to have him. We have so many questions because with two kids with type 1 diabetes and them being kids, they want to eat and they want to eat a lot of stuff and stuff
Yeah.
that is not great for the diabetes, but that doesn't mean they can't have it. We just have to do it the right way. Trevor, thank you so much to be here. And
Yay, so
I'm so
excited.
excited. They're literally just like ask you all these questions, get into that brain of yours.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing to talk about. It makes me hungry all the time too, because all I do is just talk about food. And then kids will just be like, I hate chicken nuggets. I'm just like, I want chicken nuggets now. So if you hear some stomach growling, it's just part of the normal day. So
Love that.
Yeah. So I guess tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you want to become a dietitian.
yeah, I get this question a lot. So I feel like it's like in my brain now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm Trevor. I'm 28 years old. Favorite color is green. What else do you want to know? I absolutely love, talking about food. I became a dietitian for a lot of different reasons. One of the main ones is I used to be very active in sports in high school. So I was a soccer player, I ran track and field, and I ran cross country. And I saw all the different aspects of how if I ate something, it would really affect my performance on the field or while I was running. So a lot of times if I had like a McGriddle right before I ran, I would be like, "Oh gosh," after the run, I would be like, "Man, that felt terrible." But then if I had like an actual balanced meal, I would be like, "Wow, uh, that I actually ran good." So that's one of the reasons. I have multiple reasons why I became a dietitian. Um, Another one of the reasons is actually my mom passed away when I was around 13. And so nutrition was never brought up to her. And so I always got a little curious after that. I'm like, why was nutrition never asked? Or let's see if we can change something
Yeah.
about nutrition. So, I was always a little curious about it. And then my last reason is I actually just did a little personality quiz and see like what I could do. So personality quiz, sports, and my mom, things kind of got me to wanting to learn more about nutrition. And then I got a master's degree in it and my bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics. And yeah, I first came into Orlando because my wife moved here to Orlando. And I just fell into this pediatric dietitian role. And I didn't think I was gonna be into pediatrics or even endocrinology, and it just kind of popped in, and I was just like, "Wow," "this is a great opportunity for me because I was never really, like, looking for diabetes per se.
Yeah.
It just kind of rolled in.
Was it anything you were ever like exposed to?
Obviously, whenever you're learning about nutrition, like, diabetes is always, like,
Yeah.
one of the main things you go over, so I had an idea about it, but I was never, like, going into it.
Yeah.
I was really going into, GI and the microbiome, like, I was like, "I wanna go into that stuff."
Yeah.
That stuff's really cool.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, and I knew diabetes was, a lot for people, and so I didn't know if I had the emotional and mental capacity for it sometimes. So again, I fell on this role, in pediatric endocrinology, and I was just like, wow, these kids are so cool, and I just love being a part of their lives, and I just fell in love with, diabetes and, pediatrics and all that stuff. So literally it was just by fate,
Yeah.
I think I just kind of fell into it and
I love that. Yeah, because I feel like most of the stories we hear, it's like somebody in their family had type 1 or were exposed to it family-wise, and then that's how they get into it. So I love that you got into it by fate, really.
yeah, yeah. And again, it's really fun to just work with kids that, yeah, they're going through a lot on the day to day. And like we always say, it's like a second time job or, for kids, just like a full job for them outside of school and just
Yeah.
kids. So I just try to make it as fun for them and, try to make it lighthearted in the office. And yeah, just again, going to all these different events and stuff and just seeing how they can just be a normal kid
Yeah.
out with this stinky disease.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how important is nutrition when you have type 1 diabetes? How important is the nutrition side of it?
Yeah,
Can you talk about that a little bit?
of course, of course. Actually, no, I don't want to talk about. Um, so yeah, obviously we know that anytime you eat anything with carbohydrates and proteins and fats too, but that's a little bit complicated. Anytime you eat carbohydrates, right, it raises our blood sugar.
Mhm.
So again, we have to compensate that with insulin, which type 1 diabetes, obviously we need insulin to, because our pancreas is a little booger. So yeah, anytime you eat carbohydrates, it raises our blood sugar. So that means that it's plays a big role in, how we manage our diabetes with type 1 diabetes. So again, the fact of, what type of carbs we're consuming, how much carbs we're consuming, and how we're giving insulin for those carbs is really important to know.
Yeah, my mind was blown when I first met, like, Nick and Parker and Evie that it's not sugar that you're counting, it's, like, you're carb counting,
Yeah.
which blew my mind because basically the body then breaks it down and it turns into sugar, but, like, yeah, my mind was blown on that.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people get confused by it. Isn't sugar carbs or what carbs is this? Like
Yeah.
glucose. I thought that was just in the blood. Like, what's going on here? But yeah, there's a lot of different carbohydrates out there. So there's obviously the monosaccharides, big term, watch out. The monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides. Um, and that might be big terms, but you know what? Let's learn a little bit today.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, monosaccharides is what we break those carbohydrates down into. So that glucose, fructose, and galactose, those are the main ones. And then basically that just means like a one tiny little bubble.
Mhm.
Just think of it just floating around in the blood. And so anytime you eat anything with carbohydrates, it's going to break it down into that. And so depending on the size of the carbohydrate molecule, a lot of times it will have, either monosaccharides, disaccharides, which is just think about like two little bubbles.
Okay.
Oligosaccharides is three, and then polysaccharides is just a big chain of it. And so, however long it takes you to break down those molecules shows you how quickly you will absorb that
Mhm.
fructose molecule, right? So a lot of times with carbohydrates, it's not necessarily like you're just counting sugar, you're counting, how big that molecule is and how it breaks down. And so that's how insulin can affect how quickly it can bring your blood sugar down.
Fascinating.
I feel like that was a lot.
Yeah.
No, I loved it.
So I feel like I have a really stupid question, but for people who do not have type 1 diabetes like us, and we eat something that is very carb heavy, how much does our blood sugar spike?
Yeah, yeah. So when diabetes, right, since especially in type 1, um, since our pancreas isn't making insulin, so our pancreas always makes insulin.
Mhm.
Because we had to have that baseline in the background. And again, people with pumps and been around for a while, they know that as a basal way, right?
Yeah.
And so we're always making insulin. And so anytime a person with type 1 diabetes eats something or has like a little exciting moment, like their blood sugar rises.
Mhm.
So people without diabetes, what happens is like we're always kind of keeping in a tighter range, right? Um, and it's kind of I get a lot of questions like for people with type 1 diabetes, we should have the same numbers that people without diabetes. And it's like that's kind of impossible right now.
Yeah.
As again, it's hard to really know exactly what the pancreas is doing and how it's communicating with all the other organs. But with people without diabetes, it stays in like a tighter range, basically.
Mhm.
So you kind of hear those ranges like 80 to 180 or whatever target range your doctor give you.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times if we eat something like a milkshake, or Skittles or something like that, it will rise quickly.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of times you might get that, I'm gonna go run around and do jumping jacks. And after a little bit, once that insulin starts kicking in with people without diabetes, it brings you down close, and that's that crash that you feel, or I feel really tired.
Yeah.
You still feel the same symptoms sometimes with people with diabetes, but it's just not on the same level because again, we're having to match the insulin with, the sugar that they're eating. So the times they'll just go rise up to the 200s to the 300s. But for people without diabetes, they might just go up to like, 80 to, 150 really quickly. But again, that kind of feels the same. Someone that doesn't have.
Yeah, because I always, like, tell the kids because they always want if they're low, they always wanna eat, like, a piece of candy, and it's like, yeah, that's gonna spike you up, but then you're gonna come crashing down, and then we're gonna have more lows, like, in 20 minutes or something like that, so they always look at me and roll their eyes at me, but it's like, sometimes I give in, I'm like, "Yes, have a candy," but it's like, it's that balance of, you are getting rid of this low right then and there, but then, like, soon after, it's just gonna crash down, so
Yeah, but you gotta enjoy your loads. Stuff
yeah.
that we always tell people, with one of my coworkers who has type 1, he would always be like, I'm low, I gotta enjoy it, so
Yeah.
he'll have some of his favorite foods like granola bars or, stuff like that. Granola bars, by the way, raise your blood sugar very quickly. I don't know if you knew that, like chewy bars and stuff like.
I didn't know that. I thought they were, like, pretty good for you.
Well, the oats in there, it's a little bit better than like Skittles, but if you're comparing like a granola bar versus like, whole grain cereal, granola bars are gonna,
Wow.
they have to make it sticky. And the only way to really make it sticky is like added sugar and stuff like that.
So, with that being said, what would be, like, the perfect low snack if you're trying to, like, keep yourself elevated?
Yeah, good question. It really just depends on how low you are, what that Dexcom arrow is reading. So, like for example, if you're 90 double arrows down, don't play around with that. Just get them some juice, get them some Skittles, maybe glucose tabs, stuff like that. But let's just say you're like 120, arrow down, they're running around like crazy. They're going to drop pretty quickly. Sometimes I tell people applesauce, so unsweetened applesauce. Sometimes you can do some peanut butter crackers. Sometimes you can do some milk. So whatever sometimes people have on board that has a little bit of carbs in there, that maybe some refined carbs. So I don't know if y'all are familiar with refined carbs. That's like white flour, um, white pasta, anything that's kind of white, or potato starch and stuff like that. Um, yeah, those are good low carb snacks.
Yeah, because 'cause we've noticed, like, during the night, if they go low and we give them, like, Gatorade, and then they just keep tanking, and we've done the peanut butter crackers where that's, like, a whole process because they're half asleep, you're having to wake them up, like, Nick has almost gotten his finger, like, taken out by Evie, who, like, bites it accidentally in the middle of the night getting a low snack.
Oh, she becomes a dinosaur at night, huh? Yeah.
Really does, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier to give them Gatorade because I found that, like, they've been doing it for so long that they're, like, not even awake, and they'll start drinking the Gatorade
Yeah.
to get their blood sugar up,
Well, we
but
give them the straw, and then they just, like
yeah.
yeah.
But if I need to do, like, peanut butter crackers, it's like you almost have to really kinda wake them up to do that, and so that's kinda been the hard part of trying to figure out that balance of, can we give them Gatorade and get them up enough and keep them stable?
Yeah, yeah. We've also seen people use Fairlife milk. So for that's not like a urgent low type of situation, but people have used Fairlife milk whenever like they're 120 dropping down in the middle of the night. And again, it has enough like carbs in there to bring them up, but it has the proteins and the fats to kind of stabilize them throughout the night.
It's good. I buy those for myself. I like them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
So, kind of going on, I would love to know more about that. And like, what are kind of the recommended foods to help, keep your blood sugar stable? And I know that one thing that we've kind of read, and I would love to know if this is true, is that when you have a meal, you probably should eat your protein first before you have your carbs. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question, and a lot of people ask this a lot. I don't know if you guys heard of another person out there that does a lot of blogging and stuff, but I think that's from like the Glucose Goddess or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
She does a lot of like the protein first type of thing,
Mhm.
stuff like that. But really, this comes to a whole fact of like pre-bolusing, right? Whenever you pre-bolus, technically, you want to try to bolus 15 to 30 minutes ahead of time. Now, if you're on an insulin pump, again, same sort of factor with that. You want to try to get it 15 minutes to 30 minutes ahead of time before they're about to eat. Because again, insulin doesn't start acting in the body until 15 to 30 minutes. So a lot of times, if you're not pre-bolusing, sometimes, even if you eat your protein first or something like that, you might see a little bit more fluctuations. So that's step one. Now, eating protein first, if like, let's just say they're a picky eater or they're like take a little bit more time to eat, something like that, and you're not really sure if they're going to eat all their carbs, stuff like that, and you bolus a little bit sooner. Eating protein first can technically delay, when the blood sugar is going to rise, right? So a lot of times that insulin will start to work a little bit more to start bringing it down, and then whenever they start eating the carbs, and then it'll kind of stable out a little bit. So that's really a good way to kind of combat that pre-bolusing if that's not possible for your kiddos.
And then when you're pre-bolusing, are you pre-bolusing for the whole meal or just for, like, half of it? Because, again, we never know with our kids if they're gonna fully eat everything.
Yeah, so that's bringing up extended boluses. So pre-bolusing really is for like the whole meal usually. But again, some parents find all sorts of different ways to kind of combat that unpredictable eating habit. Um, Extended bolusing means like you're covering for a little bit of it, like maybe just the blood sugar and like half of the carbs. And then maybe an hour or 2 hours later, you can see like, okay, they're about to, they actually ate all their carbs or they didn't eat all their carbs. So that's something that you could possibly do to combat that. But usually I would say like half, try to bolus for half of the carbs. And then if you see that they ate all of it, go ahead and get the rest of it in there.
Yeah.
If there's a situation where they'll say they're high, like we're going in nighttime, it's been a few hours since they've had dinner, they're still on the higher side, let's say closer to 300, and we got to give them a correction. I know you say that, and I've been always told it usually takes like 15, 30 minutes for the insulin to kind of start kicking in, start seeing effect. I always feel like it's closer to like an hour and 15 minutes sometimes. Why is that? Or am I doing something wrong that's taking so long for the insulin to, I feel like they have a full effect.
Yeah, yeah, again, these are all good questions. Did you write these down or something? um, So yeah, it really just depends on the circumstance because how many things affect the blood sugar, right? Like a bunch of different things. They could be having a nightmare. They could be, thinking about a boyfriend. Hopefully not, Evie's a little bit young for that.
She has her crushes. You talking about? Oh yeah.
Oh no. Um, so yeah, it really just depends on the circumstance. And sometimes, it might just be they're super excited and that insulin is just not gonna, because again, these are analog insulins. So a lot of times it doesn't always have that ability to, adapt to the circumstance of the body. So a lot of times it's like you give 2 units, it's just gonna act on those, whatever it's doing in the body to bring the blood sugar down. So a lot of times it's kind of like you're doing the best you can, if she is high or he's high, and you have an insulin pump again, I'm kind of assuming that this is mainly for insulin pumps, not insulin pens. Um, but if they're high, a lot of times you can give a correction with these insulin pumps now. Because again, a lot of them have that automated insulin delivery system in the background. So it can prevent those lows from happening if it was too much, or it could kind of bump up a little bit in the background if it wasn't enough insulin. So again, if it's during the day or if they are going to sleep, a lot of times you can just do a correction on the pump. MDIs or multiple daily injections, it's a little bit different because you have to give an injection, but a lot of times you can just do it. But it really just depends on the scenario.
So one of our biggest challenges, because we both love ice cream and kids love ice cream, but I've found that ice cream is the worst food you can possibly eat when you have type 1 diabetes, because how do you give insulin for it? Because I've seen the craziest things happen. You could have a milkshake and it is 70 carbs. And if I give them 70 carbs, they're going to go crashing down and go low because it's like the sugars and ice cream doesn't kick in for hours sometimes.
It's
And
delayed, yeah.
we've found that if we are going to allow the kids to have ice cream, we need to do it earlier in the day, like more like maybe a early afternoon after lunch and not a dessert after dinner. Because if we found pretty much every single time, it seems to be at 1 o'clock in the morning, they will start skyrocketing up. So
Mhm.
Why is that?
Wild, wild. Yeah, and again, food's so cool, right? Because again, all the sugar in most ice creams and then the fats and, because they're not gonna use the low-fat ice creams, not a fan of. I think Edie's is one of them, EDY. Don't like that because it's just like it's like water with sugar. I'm just like, "Come on, man." Sorry, I'm a foodie, so I
Like, you don't like it because it doesn't taste good or it's, like, not.
No, I need the cream, I need the fat. I don't care what the fat is. It's coming from the dietitian, right? So yeah, the fat and the proteins, it's crazy what it does to how we absorb blood sugar, right? Because again, what protein does, protein kind of lets it sit in the stomach a little bit long, or sorry, it kind of slows the transit time in our intestines. So basically, what that means, if we're slowing down the transit time, that means we're not absorbing the glucose as quickly. Like in juice, it's going right in the intestines. And then what fat does, it takes a lot more time to break down those long fat chains. And so it takes a lot more time in the stomach. So basically, when you have a lot of fat and a lot of protein, it slows down the stomach and it slows down in the intestines. So that means that whenever we absorb glucose like that, it's going to just slow it down totally. And sometimes it can be, because sometimes it takes 5 hours for us to absorb high fat foods. And then with high protein foods, it takes somewhere around 3 hours, but glucose, it takes like maybe an hour or two. So again, all those things coming together, it can be like you might see a spike, 3 hours later, right? So the way you kind of combat that is, again, hopefully these insulin pumps work out in the long run. At least give, that initial bolus in the beginning, the pre-bolusing and all that stuff. But I always tell people sometimes you just have to deal with it. It's almost hard to predict every single time.
Mhm.
If it's really a trial error thing. So a lot of times if you bolus for those 70 carbs like you were just saying, and you see that they just drop really quickly in the next 30 minutes, try 60, and then see how they react to that. And then see if they rise a little bit quicker in the later afternoon, or you can always do a correction at that point. Again, there's a lot of different settings, and there's also custom foods in most of these products now, these insulin pumps that you can be like ice cream, you know, late afternoon rise, you can just put in, "Okay, that happened. Let's just give him a quick bolus," and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's every kid's gonna be a little bit different. So if I tell you guys like, "Yeah, do a little do 60 instead of 70." For one kid, that might work, and then the next kid, they're gonna be like, "Yeah, I was running in the 300s all night," or, "I was running in the 70s all night." Like, "Come on, Trevor, why'd you do that?" I'm just like, "I don't know. I don't know how every kid works."
So I think from these sleepless nights, and then I'm just there, so then I just research and get on my phone and, WebMD stuff. Just probably not good. But, I did notice or I have seen things when your child is high, like for, like, an ice cream, let's say. It's important that they are urinating and that they're not, like, dehydrated. That's things I have read, which I know that there has been times with, like, both kids, and they're so high, like, nothing Nick is doing is getting them down, even, like, giving them more. So I'm like, try having them get up and go to the bathroom, and then that will slowly start to, like, get them down. Is there a connection between that, or is that just fancy WebMD stuff?
It sounds like fancy web and Nisa. Wow. It's like they got MD in the web? So yeah, what that kind of is telling me is that the blood sugars are high enough to where it's starting to the body's trying to get rid of it in other ways, right? So back in the day, like in the 80s or 70s, they used to only test blood sugars through dipsticks. So they see if glucose is on the urine and then, oh, I got to take insulin now. And then they would have the like big meter that would just go like, whoosh. Yeah, those things were crazy. I don't know if you ever looked into that. That's another search you can look into, the original, glucose meters. Um, so yeah, those things are scary. It's almost like what do you call those things back in the day where, like, there was, like, a blade and it would, like, come down?
Like
Yeah.
the guillotine?
Yeah, the guillotines. It was almost like one of those, but for, like, a blood sugar check. Yeah, it was crazy looking.
Well, we had a crazy story with Evie. One time when we took her, she had, like, a cold or something, or I forgot what she had, and they didn't know they hadn't read her charts yet that she had, like, it was, like, the nurse. So she did, like, a urine sample, and then they take her
You didn't read her
back.
charts?
Yeah, and they take her back, and then they the nurse comes flying in like really fast, and she's like, and like doesn't know what to say. And then I think it was both of us. We were in there, but what did she end up saying?
Yeah,
Like,
she's like, "Hey, so we're just analyzing the the urine test, and there's some problems with some concerns. Like, she has very highly like elevated um blood sugars and everything." And so I was like, "Yeah, she's a type 1 diabetic." She's like, "Oh, she is?" She's like, "Oh my goodness." I was like, I thought I was getting ready to break it to you that
yeah.
yeah, and you guys didn't know. I'm like, "No." Like, it's like, "Oh my God, this is why I have to read the chart first before."
And I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes me nervous, but
Yeah, how long have you worked here? Yeah.
that was a little wild of seeing that. But we, on that kind of topic, it's crazy how like having a boy and having a girl is so different with type 1 diabetes, obviously, because their bodies and stuff. But we have run into a lot of issues with Evie that almost like she what is it called? Like potty training, like she regressed, like she went backwards with potty training around like 6-ish years old, where she like would just pee her pants and have like no idea and not be able to like control it or anything like that. And it didn't matter what her sugar levels were. She could be low, she could be normal, she could be high. It didn't matter. She was just having these accidents. And we took her to so many doctors and figured out like there's nothing physically wrong with her. If anything, she's held her urine for so long that her bladder has expanded a little bit more than it should for her size. But yeah, we just, like, didn't know, and I know that Nick would go in and, like, ask, like, in her diabetes appointments, like, "Could this be related in any sort of way?" And, like, no one had a really good answer for it, and we still, like she's gotten better for sure, but it's, like, startling for us because I feel like with type 1, you have to, like, really feel your body and, like, oh, like, you hear from so many diabetics, like, "I know I'm going low," or whatever the case may be. And she doesn't have that. So, like, she doesn't feel the body.
The unawareness.
Yes, and, like, trying to, like, teach her that on how to feel your body, but then Parker yes, Parker's older, but I feel like at her age now, like, he could feel when he was starting to go low and, like, could differentiate, like, the difference between them, but any tips on that?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Again, there's a lot of things that can go into, that sort of, uh, need to urinate and all that stuff. But again, some kids like that's a big deal with, hypoglycemic unawareness or hyperglycemic unawareness. Those are things that happen a lot.
Oh, so it's, like, a real thing, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty common to me, honestly.
Yeah.
And some kids, you just have to kind of deal with it, unfortunately, because some kids, they never really find out how oh, like, you can say, like, "Oh, I'm in the 50s," and like, "Yeah, I feel fine. I'm great." Or like, "I'm in the 350s," like, and I'm never in the 350s. "Yeah, I'm fine." And that's a little scary for parents, and that's why, CGMs are so important nowadays for kids like that. But yeah, that sounds pretty common to me, unfortunately.
One time, it was, like, my first scariest low with Evie. She's, like, running around, it was summer, and she's, like, running around playing, and the phone all of a sudden went to, like, LOW, like, double arrow down, and I'm like, when you see the words, you're like, you know it means business, so I'm like, "Let's do a finger prick to, like, really check where you're at," and she was, like, 38, like, so low. She had no idea, she was perfectly fine, she was running around, she was, like, looking at me like, "What's wrong, Beck?" 'Cause they call me Beck, like, "I'm fine, I feel fine." I'm like, "You're 30 going down," like, freaking out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. It's crazy how like someone can be in the 38s and they can just be running around like with no big deal, just having the time of their life. And like as the parent, you're just like, "Where's the juice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay right there."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't move.
and then we hear from people because like we had some girls on the podcast a few weeks
Sisters, yeah.
ago, and they were talking about like times when they got low and they start like
Hallucinating.
hallucinating.
And, like, they describe like, one of the sisters described it so, like, that she was in the '70s show and everything is, like, tie-dyed and, like, she's, like, in
Wait, she
it
was
and,
in the 70s
like,
shows
she
when she
feels
was below 70?
yeah, like, she's in the
That's
set and, like
that's classic.
oh, yeah,
That's
I see
cla
what you did there.
that's classic. Yeah.
But, yeah, like, we, like, knock on wood, haven't experienced, like, the kids having hallucinations like this, but both sisters talk about it and they like know they're hallucinating and it's crazy. And I'm like, "Whoa, is that common to hallucinate like that?"
That's a new one. There are a lot of different symptoms of lows though. So people without diabetes can experience lows as well. I don't know if you knew that or not. So sometimes when I give this example a lot, when I'm eating lunch at 12 and then let's say I don't have any snacks or anything else until I go home from work, which is around 6 p.m. Sometimes a lot of times on my way home from work, like, this is 5 hours without any food, like, I get, like, angry at people, even though, like, people are driving okay, so I'll get a
Oh,
little,
you're
like
angry.
yeah, I'll get hangry and, like, again, like, that irritability is part of, like, a low symptom, so a lot of times I'll be like, "Why didn't you turn your blinker on?" You know? So I get, like, that road rage a little bit, and sometimes it can just be related to if your sugar's a
Oh,
little
I
bit
never
low.
thought about that's what actually hangry is at the end of the day.
Mhm.
That is you're probably dealing more.
Yeah, and so I tried a Dexcom on one day because sometimes we get samples and they get expired, and I was like, "You know what?" Um, so yeah, I put one on, and then one time that happened to me where I was like, "Okay, there's a blinker, going on," or they weren't putting on their blinker on the road, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, put on your bl—" like, I was yelling at 'em, like, obviously no one was hearing me because I don't like road rage, just to let y'all know. But, obviously when you get a little hangry, you just yell at people. But yeah, I saw that I was like in the 60s the entire time while I was driving, and I was just like, wow, that's my symptom of a low blood sugar. So everybody has a little bit of a different low blood sugar symptom. Yeah. Some people can just get like extremely fatigued. Some people can get, the sweaties, or shakiness or something like that.
Like, I actually think, you got like, you talking about it. So, I made 2025 the year of my good gut health. So, I did, like, a whole
Oh,
GI
yeah, for you.
testing,
Yeah.
thank you. I take, like, 35 supplements. I started working with a nutritionist, and then we did the GI, testing and all that because like, stomach issues runs in my family. My grandmother actually had, colon cancer in her early 50s. And when they found it, it was stage 4, and she actually survived. Like, yeah, she ended up passing away in, like, 83, so yeah, so she was a miracle, but we always have to, like, pre-screening and getting tests done with it, and I just have a horrible stomach. Like, everything affects it, like, everything goes to my tummy. So I have been told that I don't eat enough. So I don't snack. I've never been a snacker. So I will typically, I know it's bad, I don't really eat breakfast that much. So I'll eat like lunch and dinner. And then I feel like I'm so hungry by lunch. I'm eating so much and it's probably not the best. And then I'm making myself crash and then I like tank. And then again at dinner time, I do the same thing. So I'm having all these like highs and lows and highs and lows. And I'm always exhausted. And the nutritionist is like, "You're not eating enough." Like, that is what's making you, like, your highs and lows so much, and it's so true. And I see it with the kids, and I'm like, "Man, I should know better."
Yeah, and again, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't say like I'm not eating well enough because again, if we all ate perfectly, I think that would be almost like detrimental to our health more than like beneficial because, food's too good, to be like I'm not gonna have that, because like I still eat ice cream all the time. Like, give me some more Ben and Jerry's flavor. I love that. I don't know why s'mores and ice cream taste so well, but it tastes so good, right? But yeah, that enjoy food, and the thing is, like, some people know, like, for example, in type 1 diabetes, there's those foods that just make you go crazy, with the blood sugars, ice cream and probably your kids' examples.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I know there's some certain foods that make my stomach feel a little not well, or I might get super fatigued afterwards, but I'm not going to deprive myself of those things. So, like, for example, like a big juicy burger for me is like, I get a lot of like stomach pain sometimes, but I know like I'm not going to get rid of burgers in my life. There's so many good burger chains around here in Orlando. Like, I'm just like, Poppy Smash Burger. By the way, I'm a foodie, by
I
the way,
haven't been
so
there.
yeah, good
Where
stuff
is
over
that?
they just, it's in downtown,
Oh, okay.
they smash them right there and just, like,
Mm,
it's just
I
all
do
full of
like smash burgers.
yeah.
Yeah. But no, I totally agree with you on that because I've never been officially tested for it, but I'm like almost positive I'm at least some level of lactose.
Especially when he combines, milkshakes and bourbons and old fashions together, like
Yeah, I can tell that you have experience with this.
yeah.
But, like, I just know myself, like, I love cheese, I love, like, ice cream, that I could never give up that, right? But it was like, I just know that, yeah, I'm probably gonna have a little bit of a stomach ache, but you have to.
Is it just, like, in moderation, like, everything in like I mean, pretty much, but yeah.
I mean, well, a lot of times people will say like the 90-10 rule. So like 90% of the food should be those, part of the my plate method or like those foods that benefit us more often than not. So like the vegetables, the lean proteins, the whole grain stuff like that. But that 10% of the time, like have some fun, because again, food is way too good to,
Yes.
like, not enjoy the wonders of food, and again, coming from, a dietitian perspective, I'm never gonna tell people to always remove, remove, remove. I'm always telling people to add in, right? Because again, we have so much toxic, um environments related to food, and just getting a professional to tell you, like, that's true, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for, being just depressed, and just miserable because you can't have, your favorite foods. So it's always about adding in, whether it be a whole grain or a vegetable or lean protein throughout the week, rather than taking away your bourbon or your ice cream or something like that. So
Bourbon.
So, a really important question I have, and as most kids are, they're super active. If we're even, like, kids who are gonna be playing sports and stuff, what are some, like, kinda go-to snacks or the type of foods they should be eating before they go become really active? Because I know even with the kids, if they're gonna go outside and run around and play soccer or do their bikes and everything, I mean, they just crash and crash and crash, and we're sitting there giving them, like, Gatorade and all this stuff, and you don't wanna necessarily go in there and give them a bunch of food and say, "Alright, we're gonna fly you up to 250 and then let you go burn it all off," but, like, what's a food that they should be eating that's going to help maintain their blood sugars when they're being so active?
Oh, yes, I love talking about activity and, people with diabetes. So yeah, there's all sorts of evidence to show that, what your blood sugar is, what foods to eat, all this stuff. So typically what I tell people is if you're having like a scheduled activity, the 2 hours beforehand and the night before are probably the most important times to make sure you're having enough carbs. Because again, what activity does is once you burn off all the glucose in your muscles and in your blood, it'll start using other storage forms. So like the form in your liver is so it'll start taking that and it'll put that into your muscles because again, you don't want to start developing, all those other fatigue and, soreness and all that stuff. Um, so again, if their blood sugar is at like the 120 mark and you know that they always go low a lot of times what I tell people is like that hour to 2 hour beforehand is going to be more important than the right then and there. Now, again, if they're going to just go out and play around leisure activity, again, a refined starch, and a protein. So a lot of times that could be like a parfait, or that could be like crackers or toast with peanut butter. That could be apples and some nuts, cheese and strawberries, stuff like that. Because again, you're getting those carbs in you to make sure that you're not dropping low, but those fats and proteins also help with the fatigue aspect of it and also making sure it's stabilized at that, whether it be the 180 to 160 mark. Because again, a lot of the pumps out there, they do have activity modes now, which kinda, again, raises that target to whether it be 150, 180, what other things, but again, you don't really wanna give insulin whenever they're active, right? So a lot of times the carbs is gonna be more important than the actual insulin. So again, it really just depends. I always give a cutoff point of, like, 150 for most people. If they're above 150, and you know that they tend to drop low or they're hypoglycemic, prone, definitely wanna give an uncovered, 15-gram snack with the protein. Now, if they're above, like, 200 usually, I tell people, "Hey, you might wanna still give, a carb snack, uncovered if they're hypoglycemic prone." If they're not hypoglycemic prone, I always tell people, "You might still wanna just keep her there or keep him there, and just maybe kinda go at it throughout the day," but sometimes the activity also can change that. So, like CrossFit, for example, it's a very high intensity, high workout. That will give you adrenaline. And again, adrenaline, what that will do is actually raise your blood sugar because what it's telling the body is like, okay, we're going in this fight or flight response. So we need that glucose just in case like we're about to like bottom out. Because again, that fight or flight response is like, if we're getting chased by a bear, you don't want to like pass out in the middle of it. You want to have the glucose there to like get you going and like get that blood pumping. So a lot of times it depends on the activity. It depends on if they're hypoglycemic prone. It depends on, what that blood sugar is or what the CGM is reading. So,
So we really struggle. Evie's great at it. She'll eat like every meat known to mankind. Like she loves meats. Parker does not. So protein with him, getting him to have protein is very difficult. I know you mentioned the Fairlife milk. That's great. That's something that we're going to add to our shopping list. But anything else like protein wise that's not your standard meats that you would recommend?
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of like protein crazes coming out. It's definitely going to be another like trend nowadays, like where everything's going to have protein added to it or something like that. So it's hard to keep up with all the products. But I'm always for the whole food aspect of it first. So there's eggs, there's nuts, there's seeds, all those different things. But they're now making all sorts of stuff with added protein in it that can be really beneficial. That might be like a protein bar or something like that that might be more valuable for kids or more tasty to kids. So again, if it has added protein to it, try to go that route. So I know like kind bars have like the Z protein. I think that's kind. I don't know.
Yeah, we found the protein pasta, like
Protein
the
pasta, yeah.
protein shells that he really likes that. That's
Those
been game changer for us with him.
Yeah. And even we found these breakfast foods where it's like cinnamon buns or whatever, but it's like high protein. Like it's in like the workout section, right?
Yeah.
And I got those one day and I think it's like 20, 25 carbs for like the cinnamon bun, but like does not spike the kids at all. And it's amazing because I'm just like, this is a great breakfast food. Like they get to have something they really enjoy, but it's not going to completely spike them like some of these other foods are. And I just think it is because it's like extra protein in it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And again, there's like pancakes, waffles, like the Kodiak brand is another one. There's bars, there's like fruit bars, like all sorts of stuff that come out with like protein. So yeah, if your kid's not a fan of like protein dense foods, I mean, it's a good alternative to it, to have the protein pastas or the protein. I think there's even protein rice out there. There's like all sorts of stuff that can benefit. Yeah,
To look into it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any kind of like misconceptions when it comes to nutrition and type 1 diabetes that you feel like you can want to clear up or debunk any myths or anything?
So I mean, to kind of say, so we having this platform, we did an ad one time. Well, we did a video, a reel, and then we turned it into an ad because it did so well. But it's Evie at a skating rink. We're with Touched by Type 1. They had their ice skating night or roller skating. Sorry, roller skating. And she obviously, everyone there is going low because they're just going around and around and around. So they had ices. So both kids had an icy. My nephews were there. They don't have type 1 diabetes. Everybody was having an icy, having a grand old day. Well, she's with her icy and she's like dancing and she's like wearing Palmr stuff, obviously. So, and having the time of her life. And the amount of hate that we got from that single ad because she's carrying an icy, because a lot of people that just go in and just see our ad, they confuse type 1 with type 2 diabetes. And then we've gotten comments of like, you shouldn't have fed your kids or you shouldn't have eaten things when you were pregnant with first, which is ironic because I'm not even their bio mom. So it's like, I'm taking all this hate for like nothing, but it's like, you shouldn't have eaten certain things when you were pregnant with them. And then like, you shouldn't have fed them things and like all these type of like comments, which is like, do you get that often?
Yes, that
Yeah.
is very especially
Okay.
in the new diagnosis, a lot of times people will just be like, "Yeah, we're just gonna exercise a lot and we're going to go low carb and we'll be fine." I'm just like, "Okay, but you're type 1, so you need insulin." And so I hate the hate, It's because type 1 is totally a different, type of prognosis. not saying that type 2 diabetes is not as challenging and difficult, but yeah, it's the
I
one
almost
of
wish they had, like, 2 different names to, like,
right?
put them in separate quarters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so they don't, put this hate on people with type 1 diabetes. But yeah, one of the common things is that all diabetes should be treated the same. I feel like that's been pretty common. And again, some cultures have different ways of looking at diabetes and how to cure things and, whether it be with supplemental things or stuff like that. And again, I'm all for supplements and complementary medicine. But again, sometimes kids need insulin, whether they're type 1 or type 2 in the beginning. And so the fact that we have diabetes, that's people just think that all of them should be treated the same, that should get out of there, but again, that comes to the fact that a lot of our environment nowadays, like not a lot of people, even some like medical professionals, like they're still confused about insulin and diabetes. And so lower carb is not always the answer, some people it works, in adults or maybe some kids, like it works out wonderfuls, but a lot of times with, kids with diabetes, sometimes a low carb diet is not appropriate for them, because they might love all these foods and it might be more detrimental, to go on a lower carb diet. So it's not always about the carbohydrates, is what I'm getting at. And so proteins, fats, having a balanced diet, quality carbs over quantity carbs is going to be more important.
And is there, like, any research that has been done that, like, shows that it could be something that was eaten during pregnancy? There's none of that, right?
So yeah, there's still a lot of research being done on what actually causes type 1 diabetes. I think we're still trying to figure that out right now, but there's no evidence to suggest that it was like a certain food or, a certain environment you were in or anything like that yet. So we have no idea. So for people to think that it's like you shouldn't be eating that while you're pregnant, like that's
Yeah.
wackadoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow. Is there any advice that you would give parents, especially ones that are like, newly diagnosed kids, that the kids are going to be picky eater, right? They're trying to change their lifestyle. They can't do everything they did before. Like, what advice would you just give those parents, especially the ones that are feeling like very overwhelmed right now?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we just made some new packets in our clinic. And on the first page, I decided to put like right now it seems like it's impossible, but it won't feel like that forever. Yeah. So again, it's a lot of stuff, and you were telling people all these things with these new diagnosed kids, and even the family member might have this own preconception of things. Like, just take it one day at a time, one day at a time. With nutrition, and how they can just take that one step, just I always tell people it's not going on a diet. It's not going on like a diabetic, plan. It's literally just whatever foods they have that they consume on a daily basis. Find out typically how many carbs it is. And then you can start to see, okay, if I give this starting dose that I'm giving, I would give 2 units and their blood sugar is fine after 3 hours or basically back to where it was, that it worked, and so it's bringing their blood sugar down. So it's never a pressure to be like, you got to get on the right diet. You got to go low carb. You got to eat more vegetables. Just one step at a time. Once you figure out how the insulin works, then we'll take the step of like, okay, you want to try to add more vegetables in. Let's just try to take them to the grocery store, see what they want to try. Try out a test plate method. I love the test plate method for picky kids. It's like you give them their normal food,
Mhm.
whether that be chicken nuggets, french fries, whatever their, like, safe foods are, and then whenever you guys are making on the side, have a little test plate, so they don't feel like they have to eat that plate, but they feel like, "Hmm, what's that over there?"
I
Even if they just
Yeah, I've never
even
heard of that.
yeah, even if they just, like, poke it or they, like, smell it, that sensory, sort of, reception to it, their body's getting used to it, and whenever they see the family eating it, they're just like, "Oh, they're not throwing up, they're not gagging, they're not dying." Because some kids, like, literally, if they see any sort of, like, new food, they're just like, "No, no," they'll scream, they'll fight, and that's the exact opposite thing you wanna do is cause, like, this big tantrum at the table because, like, you have to eat this food, right? Because it's not a good environment for kids to try new foods, right? So, like, what if I told you, "Hey, eat this, broccoli right now," like, and you're just like, "I don't want it," and I just kept on pushing you to do it. You would just be like, I'm never gonna try new foods again. It's like a prison in here. You're making me try these new foods. So
That's so true. I love that.
Yeah. Trevor, wow, that was so good. So much. I feel like I learned a lot
I know.
already, and we're going to definitely have to have you come back because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. And so if you were watching this podcast, please leave a comment below and ask a question. If there's something that you would love us to ask Trevor and try to get answers for you, or if there's a topic that you want to hear about and learn, we would love to hear from you. But it was so good. Thank you so much for coming on here. I feel like I've learned a lot more. There's so much I actually want to go try now.
I know, me too. I'm so excited.
Like I want to go,
Especially this test plate.
yeah, I want the test plate. But yeah, too, like I'm thinking of what are some of the foods that we can give the kids before we know they're gonna go out and go ride their bikes. What kind of snack can we eat?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking these they love those little like the rice cakes, and get like a rice cake, put some peanut butter on it. You'll have them eat that beforehand and really see like what happens at that point. So there's so much I want to try, but I feel like I learned so much.
Yes. Thank you so much. We look forward to the next one. Bye, Palmr fam.